Hello, how are you? This is Lerone Kuntz. Today I'm going to react to a video of an interview of college students concerning Donald Trump and Joe Biden. So let me play the video and then I'll discuss.
What do you think of former President Trump?
I think President Trump was a bad people's person, but a great leader. He put our economy in a booming state. He provided a permanent funding for all HBCUs.
This is also the same president who, when 5 minority young boys were arrested in New York for a crime they didn't even commit, said that we need to bring back the death penalty.
Okay, I'm gonna stop it right there because I want to comment on that comment that she just made. This is the same president that when 5 boys got charged with a crime they didn't commit, Donald Trump asked for the death penalty. Now, this is a person that doesn't understand what she's talking about, and I say that respectfully. Let me just play what she said again.
Who, when 5 minority young boys were arrested in New York for a crime they didn't even commit, said that we need to bring back the death penalty.
Okay, now you hear this from a lot of black people. They will reference this Central Park Jogger case where 5 young black boys or teenagers were arrested for the assault, the rape, the beating of a woman jogger. Okay, I want to talk about this because in order to understand what was going on in 1989, someone needs to tell you, because you're obviously not getting that. So I hope that this young lady and everybody else that is curious about this is watching this video, because there's 2 types of people. There's people that are uninformed, don't know, and uninformed, and that's okay, and want to learn, like she and her classmates probably are, because she's a college student here in Georgia. And then there's people that don't know and don't want to know. Those are ignorant people. Okay, so we don't want to be ignorant. So I'm going to put all of this into context. In 1989, there was an incident, a terrible incident in New York City, where a jogger was raped and beaten. And after that incident happened, which shook the whole city, I'm a New Yorker. I remember this. In 1989, I was 25 years old. Okay, and after that incident, Donald Trump wrote this letter. He put it in the New York Times and New York Newsday, which is another paper in New York. And I'm going to read this letter, but I'm going to put this whole incident in context first so you can understand exactly what we're talking about. Okay, this is a collage of the media that we as New Yorkers heard in 1989 after this incident. This incident took place on April 19th of 1989. Okay, let me play it for you so you understand what we're talking about.
In New York City this morning, a jogger is fighting for her life after a brutal attack in Central Park.
Viciously battered and unconscious, wearing only a jogging bra, her hands tied over her mouth.
The suspects are 14 and 15-year-olds who blazed a nighttime trail of terror.
Assaulting an elderly man, attacking a male runner, hitting another person with a lead pipe. At one time, the group was running in a pack of more than 25 youths.
The victim is now in critical condition at Metropolitan Hospital.
2 skull fractures, a significant loss of blood, and advanced hypothermia.
If she lives, it's likely she'll suffer from brain damage.
8 suspects were arraigned this weekend, aged 14 to 17.
Some of the young men told police they were just out wilding.
Wilding is a word you won't find in Webster's.
Wilding. New York City police say that's new teenage slang for rampaging and wolf packs, attacking people just for the fun of it.
The district attorney's office says that the teenagers have confessed. The spokesman said some of those confessions are on videotape.
Okay, now, as it said, the district attorney said that these teenagers confessed, and some of the confessions were on videotape. That's what we as New Yorkers knew. That's what we were told in 1989, right? No one knew that these kids did not commit this crime. Nobody knew that they did not assault this woman in 1989, okay? Donald Trump wrote this letter 12 days after that incident. He wrote this on May 1st of 1989, 12 days after this horrendous attack took place. Do you know when we found out that these kids did not commit this crime? 2002. 13 years later. 13 years later, the person who actually committed that crime confessed, came forward and said that he did it. That's when we knew. So to say that in 1989, 12 days after the incident, when Donald Trump did that letter, wrote this letter, and put it in the New York Times and New York Newsday, that he knew that these kids did not commit this crime, that's false. Nobody knew. And he called for the death penalty for murderers. These kids did not kill anybody. This lady didn't die. She was in a coma for 12 days. She has brain damage. She did not die. So no one is calling for the murder of these kids. We were kids at the time. I remember this incident. I was 25 at the time when this incident happened. I was grown. Grew up in New York City my whole life, born and raised. I understood what Central Park meant to us in New York. There's not a lot of green space in New York. There's a lot of concrete and steel in New York. Central Park was a place that we all could go to any time of day and night. So I want you to keep that in context when I read the letter. And let me just play the mayor of New York City at the time, Mayor Koch, what he had to say about this incident.
A woman jogging in Central Park. Central Park was holy. If it had happened any place else other than Central Park, it would have been terrible, but it would not have been as terrible. It was, for everybody, not just me, the crime of the century.
Now he's right. Everybody felt like that. Everybody felt like that because, like I said, we grew up in New York. Central Park was a safe place for everybody. Every kid that grew up in New York and went to public school or even private school. I went to public school. We went on school trips to Central Park Zoo. We went to the Hayden Planetarium. We went to the Museum of Natural History that was directly across the street from Central Park. This is a part of our lives, Central Park. And then to hear like there's over 25 kids running through the park, assaulting people, is crazy. We all have sisters, mothers, aunts. This lady was jogging through the park and her life was destroyed. That devastated everybody. Okay, keep that in context. And these young guys that got arrested for this crime, they may not have perpetrated the crime against this woman, or they were proven not to have perpetrated this crime against this woman. But they were part of the pack that was roaming that park that night, beating people up and assaulting people and terrorizing everybody. So it wasn't like they were just 5 kids who were just, swept up in some sort of arrest and didn't have any participation in anything that was happening that day. They, as far as I know, they were part of it. They just did not assault this lady. They didn't do that to this lady, but we had no way of knowing that. The DA, the news, the police were on television daily saying that, hey, these kids confessed. There's videotapes of their confessions. We even got word that the parents were there for some of the kids when they confessed. So what were we to think? Now I'm going to read this letter. Now this letter was written 12 days after the incident. And now I played the mayor of New York at that time, Mayor Koch, Edward Koch. But Trump was not the mayor. Trump was not the police commissioner or the DA. He was a private citizen. He had no power to execute anybody or implement any type of measures, do anything to these kids. He's just a person in New York that's a developer and is concerned. He owned the Plaza Hotel, which is right across the street from Central Park on 59th and 5th Avenue. That's where Central Park starts. He owned Trump Tower, which is on 57th and 5th Avenue. 2 blocks away from Central Park. So he has a vested interest, as we all did, in ensuring that these type of things don't happen. He's upset, and I'm upset, and we were all upset about this. And believe me, if there was any indication that these kids were being railroaded or falsely accused, we would have been in the streets. Because we were in the streets during those times protesting other things. Race-related, police-related. But this incident right here, was not one of those incidents. There was no protest about this incident because the word had came down from the police, from the DA, from everybody who was involved in investigating this, that these kids confessed. Okay, so keep that in mind when I read this. Okay. This is the letter that Donald Trump wrote 12 days after the incident. What has happened to our city over the past 10 years? What has happened to law and order, to the neighborhood cop we all trusted to safeguard our homes and families? The cop who had the power under the law to help us in times of danger, keep us safe from those who would prey on innocent lives to fulfill some distorted inner need. What has happened to the respect for authority, the fear of retribution by the courts, society, and the police for those who break the law, who wantonly trespass on the rights of others? What has happened is the complete breakdown of life as we knew it. Many New York families, white, black, Hispanic, and Asian, have had to give up the pleasure of a leisurely stroll in the park at dusk, the Saturday visit to the playground with their families, the bike ride at dawn, or just sitting on their stoops, giving them up as hostages to a world ruled by the law of the streets, as roving bands of wild criminals roam our neighborhoods, dispensing their own vicious brand of twisted hatred on whomever they encounter. At what point did we cross the line from the fine and noble pursuit of genuine civil liberties to the reckless and dangerously permissive atmosphere which allows criminals of every age to beat and a helpless woman and then laugh at her family's anguish? And why do they laugh? They laugh because they know that soon, very soon, they will be returned to the streets and maim and kill once again, and yet face no great personal risk to themselves. Mayor Koch has stated that hate and rancor should be removed from our hearts. I do not think so. I want to hate these muggers and murderers. They should be forced to suffer, and when they kill, they should be executed for their crimes. They must serve as examples so that others will think long and hard before committing a crime or an act of violence. Yes, Mayor Koch, I want to hate these murderers, and I always will. I am not looking to psychoanalyze or understand them. I am looking to punish them. If the punishment is strong, the attacks on innocent people will stop. I recently watched a newscast trying to explain the anger in these young men. I no longer want to understand their anger. I want them to understand our anger. I want them to be afraid. How can our great society tolerate the continued brutalization of its citizens by crazed misfits? Criminals must be told that their civil liberties end when an attack on our safety begins. When I was young, I sat in a diner with my father and witnessed two young bullies cursing and threatening a very frightened waitress. Two cops rushed in, lifted up the thugs, and threw them out the door, warning them never to cause trouble again. I miss the feeling of security New York's finest once gave to the citizens of this city. Let our politicians give back our police department's power to keep us safe. Unshackle them from the constant chant of police brutality, which every petty criminal hurls immediately at an officer who has just risked his or her life to save another's. We must cease our continuous pandering to the criminal population of this city. Give New York back to the citizens who have earned the right to be New Yorkers. Send a message loud and clear to those who would murder our citizens and terrorize New York. Bring back the death penalty and bring back our police. Now, this letter was written in 1989 and is as relevant then as it is now. This letter could have been written today and people would feel even more so in favor of what he said in that letter. I know in New York City right now, where cops are getting kicked in the head and the people who kicked them in the head are laughing down the street when they get released, I know they feel the same way. I know all over the United States people are feeling the same way. So if you're going to judge Trump by what he said in 1989, 12 days after this horrendous incident happened, and if you're concerned, if this young lady or if anybody else is concerned about Trump calling for the death penalty, a person that's a private citizen and has no power to exercise any type of law enforcement against these kids or execution of these kids, then you should be concerned about the death penalty as it relates to what Biden did. Because a few years later, in 1993, he wrote the crime bill. And in the crime bill, there's a section that speaks on the death penalty, and it enhances the death penalty. It creates more crimes that can be punished by the death penalty. And in that section, it's 22 subsections concerning the death penalty. And in that crime bill, it has mandatory minimums for certain crimes, which means that the judge could not even deviate from the sentencing guidelines during those years. And it also had disparities as it related to drugs. 5 grams of crack cocaine was considered a felony. 500 grams of powdered cocaine was considered a felony. And the reason why that was done is because they knew that poor minorities had crack. So they increased the penalties for the crack and left the penalties for powdered cocaine, which rich people had, or people that weren't minorities frequently had. They left that at 500 grams, right? And that is one of the reasons why we have over 1 million people in jail right now. I've heard numbers of 1.6 million people in jail right now. And it's been high as, I think, 2.1 million because of that crime bill that Joe Biden wrote and voted on and Bill Clinton signed. So if you're concerned about the death penalty and how it affects minority youth, like you said, then you have to take a good look at what Biden did and what was the effects of what he did. Now, when Biden first came into government in 1972, there were only 196,000 people in jail in the United States, in jail and prison in the United States. Since he's been there, and since he did this crime bill, you've had well over 1 million people in jail, prison in the United States. So if you're concerned about these 5 young men who went to jail over this Central Park jogger case, then you definitely must be interested or incensed about all the enhancement of all the crimes which devastated the black community, and at the hands, literally at the hand, with the pen of Joe Biden. How can you not be? If you're concerned about these 5 youth, and like I said, we found out that these kids did not commit this crime in 2002, 13 years after. And you're going to hold Trump to that letter that he wrote 12 days after, then you got to hold Joe Biden to the whole crime bill, which he wrote, which he was the author. Okay? So if we're going to be intellectually honest about discerning whether a candidate is in our best interest, we have to look at everything. And I understand, when someone brings this stuff up, people don't have the ammunition. They really don't know enough to really counteract these arguments. But the information is out there. You just got to look for it. Don't be intellectually lazy. And don't be ignorant. If you don't know, you should want to know. And if you don't know and don't want to know, then you're ignorant. So, thanks to you for listening. I hope that this video gets to the young lady and the other guy who's sitting there going, yeah, that's right, he did. I hope it gets to him, and I hope it gets to people like him and them, so they can see from a New Yorker's perspective, who was alive during 1989, who was 25 years old in 1989, who remembers the newscast and what we were presented with and what we were told. And I hope they take that into consideration when they vote. Okay, so until next time, as always, peace and stay safe.